That is not a dog. That is my wife!
This is a true story about the hijacking of a Nazi logistics ship called Duquesa through a black operation by a British secret agent and his team. This hijacking was not easy, going through many tough obstacles. However, with courage, strong determination, and genius strategy, they managed to do it. How is the story? Let's break down. The story begins on a fishing boat in the Atlantic Ocean. On the boat, there are two men relaxing. The first is named Phillips, and the second is named Lassen. Then German troops came aboard their boat to check. Both were interrogated. Phillips said that they were on vacation. In a drunken state, Phillips casually served the German Navy officer. In fact, both of them were rambling and making fun of the officer. However, the officer immediately said that he would burn his ship. Immediately, his subordinates began pouring oil on their ship. Instantly, Lassen slit the officer's throat with a knife, while Phillips killed another person with a gun. One of his friends also got out of the boat and shot them. They had killed all the German Navy men. Meanwhile, from a distance, a German Navy warship was visible. Then one of his friends named Freddy came out of the water, who had planted a bomb on the warship. Shortly after, the warship exploded. Now it is clear that they were not on a sailing holiday. So who are they? The plot twist begins 25 days earlier. That is when the British Prime Minister was very angry because the German military led by Hitler had almost taken over Europe. The German military had also taken over the Atlantic Ocean with the help of U-boat submarines. He had disrupted the supply of logistics and destroyed it. But based on information from secret agents, it was discovered that the supply of fuel, ammunition, and supplies from U-boats was usually sent by a logistics ship called the Duquesa on the island of Fernando Po, Spain. He wanted to blow up the ship. He needed a number of the right and brave people to carry out his task. Then, the Prime Minister's loyal companion named Brigadier Colin Gubbins, who was called M, put forward the name of the brave man who was in prison. The man was named Gus March Phillips. This mission was given to Phillips. He had to blow up the German ship. Phillips also agreed, on the condition that he choose his own team. The first member is Henry Hayes, a young sailor from Ireland. And the second is Freddie Alvarez, an expert in swimming and bombing. And the third is Anders Lassen, a sturdy knife and arrow expert. And the last is Jeffrey Appleyard, an expert in making strategies. M said that the remaining 3 people will be found. However, Jeffrey is currently being held by German soldiers on an island called La Palma. However, for Phillips, it is not a problem. He is sure he can free him. Long story short, after Phillips gathered with the 3 members of his team, they began operating towards La Palma Island to free one of his team members, namely Jeffrey. However, in the middle of their journey, they were intercepted by a German warship, until what happened at the beginning of the film. Meanwhile, in another place, on a train, a woman named Marjorie Stewart and a man named Richard Herron were on another mission. Both were assigned to find out the contents of the Nazi logistics ship's cargo in Fernando Po through an archive stored in a briefcase being carried by Nazi soldiers. After getting Herron's signal, Marjorie took action to take the briefcase by sheathing the prepared briefcase into it. Then the 2 of them went to a cabin and reported it to the London intelligence headquarters.
Contact.
Cases manifest. Ready?
Ready.
400 B-grade torpedoes.
Check.
5,000 tons of diesel. Check.
1,000 tons of diesel.
Check.
After finishing, Herron came out and put the briefcase back in its original place. Marjorie followed with a little small talk to divert attention.
Thank you.
On the other hand, Phillips told his friends that the next mission was to free Jeffrey in the Nazi military base prison on La Palma Island. They started sailing and rowed a small boat. To get to the location, they had to climb a cliff. When they arrived there, when they were watching the location around the headquarters, suddenly 2 Nazi soldiers came from behind. Thankfully, these 2 soldiers were killed by Ritchson with his arrows. The plan was, they would operate at night. However, unexpectedly, a Nazi military officer came to the prison location who was likely to take Jeffrey. They finally decided to take action that afternoon. After successfully entering through the wire fence, each of them took action according to their position. Freddy and Phillips entered the room and shot all the soldiers in the room. Meanwhile, Ritchson shot every soldier who was working at the logistics location. They continued to advance, killing them one by one, until panic began when Ritchson blew up one of the main building rooms with his grenade. However, the situation was still under control because Hayes managed to seize an automatic artillery gun and shoot all the targets around him. They finished off all the remaining soldiers and managed to find Jeffrey, then took him out, and the headquarters explosion occurred. With this, the Phillips team is complete. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Marjorie and Heron have arrived at Fernando Po Island, Santa Isabel Harbor, the residence of the German military chief, Lur. Their task is to trap Lur in his trap so that he cannot focus on the ship that the Phillips team will blow up. Heron and Marjorie go to Lur with a gold business proposal. Marjorie slowly traps Lur with her talks and riddles.
Why should I entertain you?
Because you'll make more money and have lots of fun whilst doing so.
Back to the Phillips team. They are planning their next trip on the ship, from La Palma to Fernando Po, so that it is shorter and safer to reach their destination in 15 days.
Take this wider route. It's obviously longer, but it should avoid any awkward conversations with German U-boats or British warships. Weather dependent, we should make it there in 15 days.
Agreed.
Switching to Fernando Po, Heron and Marjorie are seen heading to Heron's casino bar. At the bar, Heron gets information from the Nazi soldiers that the Duquesa ship that they are going to blow up will actually sail 3 days earlier than previously planned. Hearing that, Heron wanted to return home immediately to inform London about this. But at the same time, Lur came to his club to be able to chat with Marjorie. He wanted to get information from Marjorie to find out her background. The closeness between them was established. Heron even said he wanted to hold a party to celebrate their friendship.
Then I shall throw a party to celebrate.
Long story short, Heron managed to provide news about the Duquesa ship that they were going to blow up. The information was received by M and immediately conveyed to Phillips.
The Duquesa is leaving Fernando Po in 12 days. On our current schedule, they'll arrive 3 days too late.
Can it still be done?
We're still awaiting a response from Major Phillips.
Knowing this, they began to doubt whether the mission should be continued or not. Actually, they could have arrived at Fernando Po Island faster by using a shortcut. However, they passed warships that were guarding the route.
Sorry, lads. We go shorter.
That night, while Phillips and his friends were fighting, the British Prime Minister was being grilled by his military leaders because until now the city of London was still being bombarded by German planes. But even so, the Prime Minister still put his faith in Phillips and his friends.
Men who do not keep clean hands. Men like you. But because you are men who will not stop until it is done. Godspeed, gentlemen.
The next morning, when passing through a shortcut as expected, their ship was blocked by a British Navy warship. They thought, even if they violated, at least in the end, they would only be imprisoned. But the problem was not that easy, because the ship's captain knew very well who Major Phillips was. They began to suspect him of all sorts of things. Luckily, at the same time, suddenly a German U-boat submarine attacked them. When the British Navy was busy avoiding torpedoes, that's when Phillips and his friends took the opportunity to successfully escape. On the other hand, at this time, Heron and Marjorie were facing a local leader of Fernando Po Island named Cambili Kalu. Cambili was known as a figure who had quite strong military power. That's why Heron came directly there to offer his cooperation. Coincidentally, Cambili also didn't like the Nazi soldiers who controlled his island. And finally, they agreed to help each other.
I'll help you because I don't like Nazis, not because they're Nazis, but because they're gauche.
A few days later, Phillips managed to arrive at Fernando Po Island. But before the mission began, they all agreed to meet in the middle of the ocean to avoid enemy surveillance. Cambili also participated in this meeting. Interestingly, Phillips knows Cambili as a cricket player in London. Geoffrey then explained their plan.
We're going to sink the Duquesa plus the 2 tugs.
It should be noted that Heron would previously hold a massive costume party at his casino tomorrow night. He invited everyone on Fernando Po Island. While all the guards were partying, Phillips and his friends would sneak into the harbor to blow up the ship carrying the carbon dioxide filters. And to make tomorrow night's plan easier, Cambili gave Phillips some additional weapons, plus 10 of his best members.
Howdy. You do know the Duquesa is moored 200.
The next day, before the party started, Heron sneaked into one of the power plants on the island to install a time bomb. Unfortunately, because he was too focused on installing the bomb, he didn't realize that there were already several guards behind him. He was almost caught, but managed to kill them all. Captain Lur was known to dislike parties and refused to attend them. It was Marjorie's job to persuade him. That afternoon, she deliberately came to his residence dressed very sexy, bringing a set of custom-made clothes in the style of a Roman emperor. Marjorie succeeded in persuading him. Finally, the long-awaited time arrived. That night, the military leaders began to come to Heron's casino. As for the lower-class guards, Heron provided entertainment elsewhere, in a room similar to a warehouse. They partied and enjoyed everything that was provided, could get drunk as much as they wanted and had fun with dozens of female entertainers that Heron had deliberately hired so that they would all be comfortable and not want to leave room. Problems began to arise when the captain of the Duquesa told Marjorie that his ship had just been armored by the German army.
Andava veloce come un'allodola. Ora invece si è appesantita con tutte quelle barre d'acciaio.
The Nazis anticipated that one day the enemy would try to sink their ship using a bomb. Marjorie immediately reported it to Heron. At the same time, the bomb that Heron had planted earlier that afternoon finally exploded. All the electricity in the port went out completely, and Phillips was ready to start his operation. Luckily, Heron still had time to give a signal for Phillips to immediately lift the communication device on the ship. The communication they used this time was no longer in the form of Morse code, but directly by radio telephone. And M, who was at the central headquarters in London, could also directly listen to their conversation. From here, M asked Phillips to continue looking for a way to destroy the Duquesa ship. However, in the middle of the call, a high-ranking military officer suddenly came to M.
March Phillips, this is Admiral Pound giving you a direct order. Abort this mission now.
It turned out that their mission had been leaked due to one of his subordinates who had secretly betrayed him. M immediately informed the Prime Minister that their mission had been leaked. And that could be fatal because it was considered reckless and disrupting the critical situation. They could only put their hopes in Phillips.
The mission must continue.
With very little time, and the available explosives would not be enough to blow up the Duquesa, they all debated about continuing this mission or not. But Geoffrey the strategist suddenly had an idea.
Why don't we steal them?
rather than trying to destroy the ship, it would be better to steal it. Of course, it was not easy to operate a ship this big. They needed a lot of crew. But Jeffrey said, they just had to hook the ship to a tugboat. While the explosives they had would later be used to destroy the anchor of the Duquesa and all the German military ships in the harbor. Phillips conveyed the plan to Cavill as a consideration whether he still wanted to help them or not. And once Cavill agreed, the Duquesa theft began.
Gentlemen, let's prepare.
Ritchson began to finish off the tower guards using his arrows. At the same time, Marjorie was performing a song in front of all the Nazi military leaders to lull them into a trance. Lur looked uncomfortable because he had been hanging around the party and the crowd for so long. Well, the problem arose again, because in the middle of the song, Marjorie had time to say a word that only Jews would say, so her disguise was blown. On the other hand, Phillips divided the tasks of his members. Freddy was given the task of installing all the bombs at several points, from oil tanks to enemy warships. Meanwhile, Phillips and Hayes killed the guards who were on guard around the harbor. Meanwhile, Jeffrey and Ritchson were tasked with taking over the Duquesa ship. It should be noted that there were still many crew members on guard inside the Duquesa ship. The plan went smoothly because all the guards on the coast of the harbor were successfully defeated. None of the other troops were aware of what was happening at the harbor. Even the soldiers who were partying in the warehouse were unaware that their room had been locked from the outside. One of the most difficult missions in this mission was taking over the Duquesa ship. The number of guards inside made Jeffrey overwhelmed. However, with Ritchson's strength with him, no matter how many enemies appeared, they still managed to slaughter them. Now, it was Phillips and the others' turn to steal the tugboat that was across the harbor. Quickly, they managed to take over the ship by killing all the crew on guard on it. Phillips and Jeffrey threw signals to each other, indicating that each of them had succeeded in carrying out their mission. And now, all that was left was to find a way for the tugboat to pull the very heavy and large Duquesa ship. After successfully connecting them to each other using a rope, now, all that was left was to wait for the bomb they had attached to the Duquesa ship's anchor to explode. And when the bomb exploded, they had to escape immediately, because the sound would definitely be heard by the guards. On the other hand, Marjorie was currently being taken to one of Lur's secret rooms. Several tools had been prepared there to torture her. This is where Marjorie just realized that her disguise had been blown. But just as she was about to be executed, suddenly, the bomb that Freddy had planted in the oil refinery exploded earlier than they had calculated. So the explosion delayed the execution process against Marjorie. And now, their escape has been known to all German soldiers, so they started shooting at Phillips and his friends. The guards who were locked in the warehouse earlier had also managed to get out. Some of them tried to shoot the ship using machine guns. But from the start, Freddy had installing bombs on enemy military equipment. However, they still had to face relentless attacks, with the ship's speed not being able to go any faster. Finally, they all managed to escape from the harbor area. Lur looked very angry, to the point of killing his two friends due to an argument. He immediately ordered his members to chase Phillips using a military ship. But suddenly, there were no more military ships that could be used to chase Phillips. Therefore, Lur wanted to vent his anger by torturing Marjorie to the last drop of blood. Hearing this, Marjorie remained calm and secretly took out a gun hidden in her thigh. Moving on to Phillips and his team, they planned for the Duquesa ship to be confiscated by the British military. Because their mission was unofficial, as soon as they surrendered to the British Navy, they were all immediately arrested like criminals. Before parting, Phillips thanked Cavill profusely for helping them get this far. News about the Du Hesse ship immediately reached the ears of the British Prime Minister. He also learned that Phillips and his team were being held in one of the British prisons. And, when Phillips and his friends were about to be punished, suddenly, the Prime Minister appeared to welcome them and express his pride to all of them, because the success of their mission had a big impact on England. Now, America and Russia have agreed to work together to fight Germany. Merchant ships passing through the Atlantic waters can now also pass safely without fear of being destroyed by German U-boats. Therefore, Phillips and his team were appointed as elite troops under the British Prime Minister.
From now on, they work for me.
And as a closing, here is the profile of their next story. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you always get the next interesting story info. See you. Don't forget to be happy.